Hey, good morning, world. It is May 5th. I guess it's Wednesday, May 5th, or is it Thursday? Losing days. But May 5th, 2022 at 8:28 a.m. my time. And I guess I'm grinning because I just want to say thanks to all of the followers and, the energy that we've created on Twitter. I was just astounded last night because I don't Twitter, sorry, TikTok, my social media bad. I want to thank all of the followers on TikTok because, every once in a while I do the TikTok thing, and I'm just astounded that, you know, there's so many beautiful women, there's so many fantastic, outrageously insane athletes, there's so many cute dogs, there's so many people with great energy and dancing, and what I'm doing is the antithesis. I'm just some dude, basically talking into his camera, telling you what I know. And we've reached a lot of people, and I'd love to see it translated, please, to places like YouTube. If you could go to Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs, the con, that would be awesome. And likes and subscribe. And check me out on Twitter. I would love to get some more Twitter friends on there to get the message out because it's a ridiculously loud world. I mean, face it. There's a lot of talented people out there doing things that we all want to watch. And there's a lot of really, really smart people out there that I continually discover on social media like YouTube and other places. And then there's a lot of really dumb people. But then there's a lot of people that are in positions where they have much bigger, broader, wider audiences, and I have access to them, and yet they're sitting on some of the things that I have, and from where I'm sitting, the whole world's a mess, right? So yesterday, the stock market just surges, and if you happen to catch what I happened to drop on you yesterday, I could have gone one or two ways, right? Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, could have announced a 0.75 increase in terms of how they were going to tackle to interest rates to tackle inflation. But they came in low, and Wall Street's all about expectations. So there was this huge buy of the debt because the market had been crashing last week, and then it just surged yesterday on expectations. And really what's been going on, and what I'm trying to get you guys to understand, because I may as well just say this up front. I want you to think of me as a guy running for president. Am I running for president? No. But if I were president, I would be telling you the things that I'm telling you because somebody's got to tell you this to the millions of people who don't understand how this works. And it's all in the con. And again, the truth of everything is at www.thecon.tv. The sooner you wrap your head around the con, the sooner we can all walk in lockstep in a path towards redemption, which would be to recalibrate liberty and justice for all based on the integrity of law. But Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve, are continuing what the Federal Reserve has been doing since really 2009, and that's the point. And it was Alan Greenspan first who ushered in all of this deregulatory madness. That led to the Federal Reserve really being the end-all be-all for the global economy. And it's just incredible smoke and mirrors of deception. And the deception is what kills me because, if you look at Fed policy and you look at low interest rates and then you look at liquidity in the marketplace, the idea has always been for the Federal Reserve to maintain full employment and low inflation. Well, two things happened because of the, liquidity scenario. Was that ultimately they pumped so much money into the global economy, i.e. the financial system, that the financial system uses that capital to do things that benefits itself, okay? And its investors or, the billionaires and, the multinationals that it serves. And they're working for themselves. They don't work for the country, okay? So a lot of people say the performance of the stock market isn't the performance of the economy, but it's a lead indicator of what's going to take shape in the economy because everybody who makes decisions about the economy is obviously at the apex of how things work in the stock market, first and foremost, and how anybody can say that there's not a corollary with a straight face is full of shit. But the liquidity that the Federal Reserve continue to plow into the system, when you hear professionals on CNBC or just, podcasters and everybody else trying to wrap their heads around it, what drives me absolutely insane is that, the notion of capitalism or the idea of supply and demand in our economics and how these Fed policies can interact what they're saying since really pretty much the COVID injections and everything that's happened since is that we pumped so much liquidity into the system that we created more demand than supply. Now things got all jammed up because of supply chains and everything else during COVID, and it became a train wreck, which obviously had a big influence on inflation. But so too did, of course, too much money being in too few hands, and those too few hands working for itself versus the broader economy, which is just theft. And it's all on display once again in the con, because what they're not telling you is that we had, really going back, I think 2016 is when it officially starts, but we had emergency measures in 2009 that constitute the enormous sum of $29 trillion that went in the economy to backstop the criminality of Wall Street that is in the con, that led to really a reshift of how we do things in the world. And this never happened before at the level that it does. And what they did was, by pumping $29 trillion of liquidity into the financial system that they had no accountability for, no criminal convictions of all of the stuff that we lay out in the con, which was the world's largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended. And ultimately what they did was they got the bad, toxic assets off the books of the banks so that they could create liquidity and loan to the global economy. And these are through central banks. And those toxic assets are what we show how they metamorphosized in the con. It's a assembly line of fraud. And so if you're in on it, you're incentivized to lie, steal, and deceit to the consumer to get deals closed, to move them through the assembly line where everybody basically rubber stamps approvals because they wanted to create volume. And they created volume because of perverse incentives that create modern executive compensation for those at the top of the heap called, the CEOs, quite frankly. And those CEOs knew what they were doing, and what they were doing was they were getting people to lie, steal, and cheat to basically steal from the American people. And by doing so, they blew up the world, and then they themselves walked away with all the loot. It's so beyond anything that Hollywood has ever tried to do. And my biggest frustration, considering all the noise that's out there. So, for example, I'm going to name names in this situation. So, David Sirota is a guy who operates a platform called The Lever. He's a progressive ideologue, but who's also a journalist. He was a speechwriter for Bernie Sanders, and now he has this platform, and he was a co-writer of a great film, a film I've seen many, many times, called Don't Look Up. And Don't Look Up, of course, is on Netflix. I think it's been seen by 200 million people plus around the world, and it's, of course, this comedy about a meteor that's going to plow into the earth, and we can't fix things because we're at each other's throats, and everybody's got to blame everybody else, and everybody's full of shit. And it's satire, but it's so close to the cuff. But here's a guy that I have direct access to, and I'm literally had inundated him with information that he just turns around and uses for his own purposes without getting to the truth of what it is that I'm trying to tell you guys. And so again, imagine me now being a voice of a guy that could potentially, claim that he's running for president, but if only to get this information out to the people that need to hear it. We got to create a global grassroots movement, a United States grassroots movement, to purge corruption, to reconstitute liberty and justice for all through the integrity of law. And you do it by exposing this gargantuan lies and deception that led to millions of people having their houses stolen. And there's so much else in terms of healthcare and other things, and systemic prison problems and all of those types of things as well. But in terms of the financial system, David Sirota last night did an interview with a guy that we did an interview, my colleague and I, not long ago. And he's fantastic, a guy named by the name of Ed Seidel, who's revealing a lot of fraud that has basically targeted seniors and pensioners, what Wall Street calls dumb money, and they loot these pensions. And then they do it based on the smoke and mirrors that they can, and nobody holds these, banking managers from these hedge funds to account who have state pensions that they're stealing from teachers and fire workers and plumbers and all of these other types of working people that have saved their entire lives to have their pensions stolen through this this incredible deceptive operation that has become our financial system. And so I've brought to David, this information about literally millions of people being foreclosed illegally in courts that the United States judiciary is aware of. There's no way they don't know exactly what took place with all of these liars' loans that went into liars' foreclosures based on robo-signing and all of these other things that have happened now for 13 years, where people have been fighting to save their lives, and they know the whole thing is fraud based on these different actors called servicers and foreclosure mills that can just doctor up phony paperwork, claim that they're owed the debt, and they're not because of all the complications that happen with securitization, and there's much more to it. But the bottom line is that it goes to Fed policy here, because these entities, these hyenas, these jackals, and this is what happened to me, and this is why I made the con to begin with, because I had to understand what this whole system was doing, because it never made sense to me. Because otherwise, I would have had, quite frankly, if I would have put a rewind on my career for the last 12 years, really what I should have done is got out of becoming an investigative journalist and just simply gone into real estate. Especially when I learned what I knew, because I could have made a mint. We probably made so much money and continue to make money until the Federal Reserve changed its policy to rein in inflation and then stop the most important part, quantitative easing or stock buybacks, the security buybacks. So what we show in the assembly line of the con is everything gets put into mortgage-backed securities that ultimately the Fed now is buying sight unseen, and they have since I'm going to say 2016. It's really going back to 2012, but 2016, and these are sawdust. These are hyperinflated assets that nobody owned that the government bought back. So those of you who hate socialism and you hate communists and all of those sorts of things, just know that's what our financial system, the Denzians of capitalism, supposedly, and capitalism is really not just about money, i.e. capital. It's about risk. It's about risk reward. It's about, the best getting to the right spots with the right stuff that most people consume to create money. So the richest amongst us are the most successful for being smarter and more clever than everybody else, not more diabolically deceptive. And ultimately, that's what we've done. We've created this situation with the Federal Reserve where they pump free money into the system to the financial institutions that are the hedge funds, the too big to fail banks, the private equity, and I don't know if I'm missing any of them, but the long and the short of it is that they have all of these different games that they can hedge and they can formulate and they can play and they can pump and dump and they can do this thing. But at the end of the day, for the actual securities as it relates to actual assets that they can hyperinflate, they buy them back. It's sickening. And then they can sit on it, and then they can ultimately sell it back to bonds all over the world, and they, offer a specific rate, and people, invest in it because they assume that the whole thing is working the way it's supposed to work, but it's not, and that's all in the con. So if I were president, the first thing I would do, honestly, is I would get to the bottom of this. I would make the entire country aware of who did what, when, and when. I'd have, the crack prosecutors bring the charges, get Congress on board, because hopefully if I were the president, that meant that I created a populist groundswell where everybody was running for office around the country against, the duopoly, the corruption that happens both in the Democrats and the Republicans, who I refer to as the new robber barons and the new Confederacy, and we'd freaking get busy, snapping the whip on making sure that we got accountability for the guys stealing from the system. $50 trillion went to this system when maybe $5 trillion went to 300 million people, okay? That's the ratio here. They're getting away with the most massive rape, financial rape in the history of the world, and that brings me back to, we're all flawed, right? So all of us, many of us are watching the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard trial, and I heard a lot of testimony from Amber Heard yesterday, and I tell you, she was pretty compelling in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, where's the evidence, first and foremost? And second of all, it's kind of like, well, you're not Weinstein in this situation, because it was reciprocal, because, it was Johnny Depp, a train wreck artist, rock star, who had drug problems, who probably volatile and all of the different substances that he was abusing. Yeah, I could certainly buy that. Was it to the extent that Amber's saying? I'm not quite sure about that. She certainly displayed all sorts of problems herself, right? But the point that I'm trying to say is that where's the evidence? I listened to this so-called forensic psychologist who said all sorts of really horrible things that she got firsthand from Amber. Well, if Amber's a liar, then maybe none of that stuff actually happened, or different degrees of it, or who knows what went on. But in a court of law, that's why you have evidence, right? In the con, we have evidence of everything that happened at every step of the way that impacted 300 million people, and I can promise you 300 million people have not seen the con. Why? Because guys like David Sirota and others haven't helped us bring this to the market, because they've already broken through to being able to be on Netflix. Netflix being, majority owned by BlackRock, and Netflix took a tank last week, and who knows what, when, and how. But the bottom line is that the system doesn't want you to know what I'm telling you. but somehow I'm finding an audience in between beautiful people doing what they do, rad guys doing what they do, beautiful puppies and dogs doing what they do. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that we've got at least a toehold, and I really appreciate it. But there's so much more information. You can find it all on the Con. Please join me at Patrick Lovell, Truth Bombs the Con. Please join me on Twitter. And then please join me to create a revolution of our mind, body, and soul. I mean, my God, if I had, the perfect life, I'd be on top of my game. I'd be living on some beach somewhere, doing yoga every day, skateboarding and surfing, and then, tossing back a couple of surf tacos at the end of the day and being pretty stoked on that, But I'm not there. I'm in a situation where I'm desperately trying to get millions of people to understand the country that we think we have is not the country that we believe it to be. It's all a myth. It's all deception. It's all bullshit. And our choices can't be either racism or corrupt motherfuckers. Come on, man. So I hope you'll join me, and I hope that we can get busy, because I just want to, show people out there that are jamming this up that we can get to people to where millions of people are finally going, no way, no more of this bullshit. This dude Patrick Lovell knows what he's talking about, and he's going to help us get more people to understand what he's talking about so we can freaking take over the fucking kingdom again. Because again, like I told you, and I'll finish up with this, guys, just think of it as Game of Thrones, right? If you take the Iron Throne, you get the Iron Bank. The Iron Throne is the White House and Congress. The Iron Bank is the Federal Reserve. And obviously you get those three, you get the judiciary too. So we gotta recreate life, liberty, and justice for all, for a country of, by, and for the people. My name is Patrick Lovell, and I approve this message. Onwards and upwards.